Europeans voting in the EU elections were forced to cast their ballots into a coffin. They had to choose between suicide by state-sponsored invasion from Africa and Asia, led by EU communists, and death by invading Bolshevik forces from Russia, Africa, and Asia, led by Vladimir Putin. With disenchanted voters facing this existential dilemma, the EU communists made the Hobson's choice easier for them by subverting their own parties in favor of Putin's Bolshevik puppets. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, who always opposed a Ukrainian victory over Putin, suddenly announced conscription and civil defense plans in the event of a war with Russia, right before the elections took place. He did this to scare Germans into voting for the AfD. Putin's friend and former Rothschild banker Emmanuel Macron, who had initially called for capitulation to Putin, threatened to send French troops to fight in Ukraine, which he knew would scare the French public into voting for Marine Le Pen's National Rally Party. Scholz and Macron sabotaged their own parties to help elect Putin's Bolshevik puppets. They deliberately chose not to make their radical announcements until after the EU elections, knowing that their volte-face would help elect Putin's puppets. Putin's supposedly far-right puppets are also communists, and they are planning to destroy NATO so that Putin can invade all of Europe without resistance, and with the assistance of African and Asian armies, he has agitated to slaughter European whites in retaliation for European colonialism. Obscenely, hypocritical Putin and Xi are themselves communist colonialists, and their Bolshevik forces are taking the place of European colonialists to enslave the world, as was always the Marxist-Leninist plan. Though Putin decries colonialism, he is himself a communist colonist of the worst sort, invading his neighbors by force and conquering Africa and Asia with the covert assistance of the deliberately self-sabotaging EU. As he often does immediately prior to critical elections, Putin had his Muslim terrorists kill Europeans to help elect his know-nothing puppets who make it appear that they oppose the immigrant invasion, while inviting Putin to invade Europe with the assistance of bloodthirsty foreign Bolshevik hordes. It is a classic example of problem, reaction, solution. Putin's comrades, the EU communists, imported masses of foreigners who Putin's Bolshevik puppets denounce, while empowering Putin to bring in literal armies of vengeful foreign forces to wipe out Europeans. Putin's terrorists kill Europeans to inflame them to vote for anti-immigrant and anti-Muslim candidates. This, while Putin built the largest mosque in all of Europe in Moscow to help bring Islam into his fold against the West. Putin's Bolshevik puppets agitate Europeans against America, whose nuclear bombs safeguard Europe through the NATO alliance. Once Europeans turn against their American allies, Americans will likewise reject Europeans and have no appetite nor incentive to protect Europe with nuclear deterrence. Putin will then be empowered to invade and hit Europe with nuclear weapons, with ease and full impunity after his fifth column deplete even their own nuclear arsenals and anti-missile defenses and make enemies of the Americans. The communist heads of state of the EU have been importing hordes of African and Asian invaders into Europe to destroy the demographic rule and homogeneity of indigenous European nations and to eventually serve in Putin and Xi's Bolshevik armies, exterminating Europeans. Putin's puppets pretend that they are opposed to this invasion, but they themselves are welcoming in Putin's military forces from Russia, Africa, and Asia by destroying NATO and cutting off assistance to Ukraine. Macron and Le Pen are agreed on handing Africa over to Russia and China. Putin is recruiting Africans into his armies to commit genocide against white Europeans. Putin's puppets, Angela Merkel, Silvio Berlusconi, and Emmanuel Macron, together with other EU communists, opened the gates to African and Asian invaders, knowing this would eventually provide the pretext for Putin's supposedly far-right Bolsheviks to win elections by opposing immigration and NATO. They also knew that these invaders would ultimately join Putin's forces. No party has yet emerged in Europe which actually proposes to defend and promote European interests. None offer to employ NATO to defend Europe from the EU communists and Putin, as well as from the African and Asian invaders. Instead, all of the European parties represent the foreign interests of the Zionists and communists to exterminate Europeans with massive invading forces of Russians, Africans, and Asians. This invasion is already happening both as state-sponsored population transfers by the EU communists and as military forces which Putin has recruited in Asia and Africa and brought to Ukraine. Neither Putin's Bolshevik puppets nor the EU communists will repatriate those invading forces who have already been entrenched in Europe. That is not what Putin and his communist Zionist backers want. The EU and Bolshevik Russia are two teams with the same owner, and their battles are staged to produce planned results. The EU communists will continue to flood Europe with state-sponsored invaders, while Putin gathers the armies of Africa and Asia to join with their fifth column invasion force in Europe and kill off every last white person. The plan is for Putin's far-right puppets to fully destroy NATO, so that there is no hope for a new European movement to ever actually use it to safeguard the lives of indigenous Europeans, even if Europeans begin to realize what is happening to them, and understanding that both the EU communists and Putin's Bolsheviks are planning to exterminate them, and are working together towards that final end. If Europeans fail to immediately provide their own leadership, which actually serves their best interests while concurrently combating their mortal enemies, they will soon cease to exist and be erased from memory forever.